Hey guys, in this video I'm going to introduce you to another Openwork lace pattern. This is a fairly simple pattern to knit up. It produces a fabric that's very nice and airy. This is the right side of the fabric and this is the wrong side. It tends to curl a little bit at the start, but if you were to block this piece or put a little bit of a border at the bottom by doing a few rows of just plain knit or maybe a moss stitch, then it should lay pretty flat. And it's fairly easy. I would say a beginner or maybe an intermediate beginner could easily do this stitch, and it's worked over just a few rows, and you really only need to know one set of stitches to do it. So let's go ahead and get started. What I've done here is I've cast on 17 stitches using the long tail cast on method. If you're not familiar with that, I've provided a link down in the description field, and I've also provided a link to the pattern. And I've put in a few rows of just plain knit, just a couple rows on either side. Now the pattern is a repeat of 4 rows, and in terms of stitches you need a multiple of 6 stitches plus 3 plus 2. The plus 2 is really for one stitch on either side. That's a garter stitch border, and so you need a multiple of 6 stitches. So I have 6 plus 6 plus 3 plus my 2, so I have a total of 17 stitches here. As long as your number of stitches follows that rule, this pattern will work. So the very first row, the pattern calls for a knit 4, so you just start off by knitting 4 stitches. And then your pattern repeat begins. So we're gonna yarn over, so just bring the yarn forward, slip the next stitch, so insert as if to purl, and slip it over. Okay, this would be called slipping the stitch purlwise. Now some patterns will call for slipping the stitch knitwise, but this one we're gonna do it purlwise. The next step is to knit the next 2 stitches together. So you insert your needle through both loops of the next 2 stitches and knit as usual, dropping both stitches off that needle. Now comes the slightly tricky part. You have to pass the slipped stitch over. So you'll notice that we have 2 stitches here. This little diagonal stitch that you see was the stitch that formed when we did the yarn over. This one here is the stitch that we just slipped. So that's the one that we have to pass over. So we're going to use the left needle to pick up that stitch like so. And we're just going to pass it over this first stitch. Okay, let's see that one more time. I'm going to pick it and pass it over. Now you can use your finger to just sort of make sure that that stitch doesn't drop off, and you pass it over. Then you do another yarn over and you knit 3 stitches. And that's your pattern repeat. You're going to keep doing that pattern repeat. The yarn over, slip 1, knit 2 together, pass the slip stitch over, knit 3. You're just going to keep doing that until you reach the last stitch. In this case, I only have one more pattern repeat or the stitch repeat, so let's do that. I'm going to yarn over, slip, knit 2 stitches together, pass the slipped stitch over, or psso, then yarn over and then knit 3 stitches. That leaves us with the last stitch, which we're just going to knit. Now, as I said earlier, the first row and the third row are really where you have to do the pattern. The second row and the fourth row, you're just going to knit the first stitch, because in this case we have a 1 stitch border on either side. Then you're going to purl the rest of the stitches. So I'm just going to do this for row 2. I'm not going to do that for row 4, but it'll be pretty much the same. You're just going to purl the stitches. This is good because you don't have to focus so much while you're on this row. You can just purl. The only point of caution is to watch for that stitch that formed from the yarn over. So let me get to that stitch right here. This sort of loose stitch, sometimes it can drop accidentally. So just if it drops, just pick it back up and just keep purling all the way to the last stitch at which point you'll knit the last stitch to form this edge of the border. Knit it. Okay. It always helps with whenever you're knitting lace patterns to count your stitches after 1 or 2 rows, just to make sure that you've done everything correctly, you've done the right number of yarn overs and haven't done too much, too little. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 17. We're good. I'm at 17 stitches. Row 3, you're going to knit 1. Then you're going to do pretty much go into that same pattern, repeat. Yarn over, slip 1, knit 2 stitches together, pass that slipped stitch over, yarn over, knit 1, knit 2, knit 3. And when you're first getting started, just pay attention, do the yarn over, slip 1, knit 2 together, pass the slip stitch over, and remember to do that second yarn over. That's the one thing that when I was first knitting this pattern, I would always forget to do that second yarn over. And after a while though, it sticks. After you've done a few rows, it just sticks in your head, kind of becomes a song. So yarn over. Now you'll do this pattern repeat in this 3rd row. You'll do this pattern repeat until you get to the last 4 stitches. Then it changes just a little bit. You put the yarn over, you slip the next stitch, you knit the 2 stitches together, pass the slip stitch over, do the yarn over, and then there's no 3 stitches to knit, there's only 1 stitch left, which you knit. And that's it. And then the next row you'll just do knit 1, purl all the way across, and knit to the end. Okay? And after you've knit up the pattern a little bit, this is what it'll start to look like. Now this yarn I've used here is slightly variegated, and it's a lighter yarn, a little bit of a skinnier yarn. If you knit this with really skinny yarn, then it'll make for a very nice lacy scarf. And one other point I wanted to make was, as you're knitting this, you can certainly keep track of which row you're on, whether you're on row 1 or row 3. If you're facing this side of the work, then obviously you either need to start on a row 1 or a row 3. If you're on this side of the work and your yarn is at this end, then that's the wrong side row. That's just the purl row. Okay, but if you're on this row, let's say you can't remember, was I on row 1, was I on row 3? There's an easy way to find out. Just get one of these 2 sort of rows that you see here. Just find any of these middle rows, stretch the yarn a bit or the fabric a bit, and get to the bottom here. With each pattern repeat, you actually get 2 holes. Okay, so this hole would have formed in row 1, 2. This hole would have formed in row 3, 4. So that's row 1, that's row 3, that's row 1, row 3, row 1, row 3, and so you can keep doing that. And here I have row 1, row 3, which means I need to start with row 1 on this row. And so you could just do it that way, and you know that you're on row 1. You don't have to keep track. That's one way to do it. You can certainly use a knitting counter, or you can also just manually keep track once you stop your work at night, just to remember where you were the next day. If you're knitting every day though, hopefully you'll remember where you stopped, where you left off the previous night. I hope you enjoyed watching this video, and should you want to watch more videos, please subscribe to my channel, Knittycat's Knits. Leave me a comment, or if you have questions or suggestions for additional videos, do let me know. And I do hope you give this pattern a try. Happy knitting!